our next guest has some new insights on the adoption of institutional ETH staking. Joining us now to discuss is co-founder and president of crypto platform Anchorage Digital, Diogo Mónica. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So some new information that Anchorage is releasing this morning. Talk to us about the key takeaways. What are you seeing when it comes to institutional ETH staking?
Yeah, this year has been pretty great for Ethereum overall. Price action aside, the platform, the evolution, the updates, and specifically there was a key moment early in the year, which was the Chapella upgrade, which we saw a dramatic uptick in institutional participation. In particular, we've actually seen 4 times the volume and the amount of ETH staked on our platform beginning year to date. And over 40% of our clients who hold Ethereum at Anchorage are now staking with us. That was lower than 10%, about 5 to 7% earlier this year. And so really the ability of having withdrawals post-Chapella and the trust that institutions are having on Ethereum is making institutions that had Ethereum not just participate in the consensus now, but also other institutions bet on Ethereum and start buying back.
You know, we had in our previous discussion a bit about how higher interest rates are, of course, pushing up a hurdle rate for all kinds of returns, and that includes, I would assume, staking. What kind of returns have those who have staked their ETH? What are they looking at? What kind of rates are they getting?
It's interesting because I don't think anyone is looking at Ethereum staking as an investment when it's side by side compared to a T-bill, for example. What is happening is that institutions are very excited about crypto and about the future of the space. And so they're buying into the assets that they believe are going to be the big winners. And some of those big winners are Ethereum and Bitcoin, as you'd expect. So crypto natives already had Ethereum. They might not have been staking it, but they already had Ethereum. So there's no one-to-one comparison. This is just them reducing the amount of dilution they have on a yearly basis for the fact that they were actually not actively participating in the consensus. Corporates, obviously, that had Ethereum are still waiting a little bit more on the tech side, but then there's major players in traditional finance and very large funds that are now either buying in because they are bet on Ethereum overall, and of course, they want to participate in the consensus, and they actually don't want to pay for the dilution. So it's less a side-by-side comparison of different investments and more if you are bullish on the space and if you're bullish on Ethereum, of course, you'd participate and you'd stake your ETH.
Yeah.
Who are the more TradFi institutions that are staking ETH with you?
Yeah, there's lots of anywhere from sovereign wealth funds to very large asset managers. So you can expect VCs, very large VC funds. And we also have some corporates, some public traded companies, some of these large allocators, pension funds. Those are the ones that are the most traditional capital I institutions that actually are staking. Of course, the majority by number and percentage are obviously the crypto natives. So the institutions that actually already had crypto and are just comfortable with this and post-Chapella upgrade and having the liquidity and the ability to withdraw. Of course, they started migrating en masse to do Ethereum staking.
So what would keep them from staking? Is it because many of them are not holding long-term enough to do it? What would be the mindset between staking and not staking?
It's primarily about liquidity. If you are a fund, for example, that has in-kind redemption and has redemption rules for investors, you do not want to be caught in a situation where you stake all of your Ethereum. It takes you potentially weeks to get the Ethereum back, and all of your Ethereum is staking and thus is locked, right? You can't take that risk, that liquidity risk. And the next one is tax. So how is this treated? How is it taxed? Do you have the structure in place and the confidence from your compliance and legal team that you understand the taxation? And then finally, I would say trusted partners and parties like Anchorage that actually we're still the only federally chartered bank. And so it's pretty clear that institutions can do staking safely with us. And we've been in market for a long time, and that this is actually part of our charter. Staking is one of the actual business lines that our OCC chartered bank has. So all of those things were necessary for us to actually get the comfort from institutions to do it. And as I mentioned, the unlocking piece really was the Chapella upgrade and the upgrade that allowed withdrawals and thus allowed institutions to feel more comfortable about their liquidity.
Diogo, how are you working with regulators? Earlier this year, we saw Kraken settle with the SEC and discontinue their crypto asset staking as a service program. How are you working with regulators after that happened? Is there any concern for you that the SEC may turn around and say, actually, what you're doing here is not compliant?
There's always that risk. Anchorage is in a different situation than the majority of these folks, well, really than all of them, because we do have a banking license. And our banking license allows us to do things like custody securities. And so to a large extent, of course, we're following pretty closely what the SEC says. But I would say the SEC likes the fact that there's an ambiguous qualified custodian in the form of a federal charter in Anchorage. And so, yes, clarity is necessary, and whether an asset falls under the regime of securities or commodities or something else is incredibly important. However, Anchorage actually benefits from the fact that we have the highest regulatory scrutiny in the land. We've already done the hardest thing. And so to a large extent that insulates us from, we already have the bank, and insulates us a little bit from some of these changes, because we can deal with commodities very easily, and we can also deal with securities.
So ARK is filing for an ETF, an ETH ETF. They filed this past week for one. Let's say, crazy assumption, that it gets approved. What does it mean for ETH staking?
I think first and foremost, I think we're going to see that an ETF will drive interest. Will drive interest because it's obvious that if it's more available for retail and institutionals alike, then there will be more ability for people from their traditional brokerages to just simply put Ethereum and buy an ETF from whichever broker they actually use traditionally. So that one seems obvious, and I think the industry in general agrees because of the market movements that happen around news of ETFs walking towards approval. Bitcoin is one thing. Ethereum is a little bit of a different animal, in the sense that it's going to be critical that some of the ETFs do stake, because otherwise the difference is not just paying the fees of an ETF to hold Ethereum. Now, as an investor, you're actually looking at this Ethereum ETF, and it's not just the fees that you're paying that are the downsides, is the added dilution that you have if these assets are not staking. So I do think it changes the calculus pretty dramatically, and it is different from a Bitcoin ETF in terms of how the ETF is set up and how future ETFs will appear, and whether they stake or don't stake will be one of the big differentiators of the folks that will be able to solve this problem. And partly is because the infrastructure is more complex, there is more risk, there is the need for different types of partners. Staking is something that we do, but it's not something that everybody does. And so that will be interesting to actually see how the first entity that actually comes to market, not just with an ETF for Ethereum, but with an ETF for Ethereum that allows folks to claim the gains or to be protected from the dilution.
All right, Diogo, we are going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
That was Anchorage Digital co-founder and president Diogo Mónica.